Ever wonder what makes a piece of writing just stick with you? Like, truly unforgettable? Well, today we're going to dive deep into the mind of Aristotle to uncover a secret he believed was at the very heart of powerful writing. We're journeying into his masterwork, the Poetics, to find the one skill he said was a true sign of genius. So, you ready to unlock it?
Okay, so let's kick things off with a puzzle, straight from the man himself. I mean, think about all the stuff in a writer's toolkit, right? Grammar, structure, vocabulary, all things you can study and get better at. But Aristotle was convinced there's one crucial element that you just can't learn from a book. The one thing that separates the merely good from the truly great. Any guesses?
And there it is. The answer is metaphor. Kind of surprising, right? Not plot, not character, but having a command of metaphor. And listen to that claim again. It is the one thing that cannot be learned from others. For Aristotle, this wasn't just some fancy literary device. It was the telltale sign of a brilliant, innovative mind.
So what on earth did he mean by that? Why put so much weight on this one specific thing? Let's really dig in and unpack what metaphor meant to him and why he saw it as this innate, almost magical, unteachable talent.
You know, his definition is so simple, but it's also incredibly deep. It's not just about saying this is that. At its core, it's about perception. It's about having an eye for resemblances. This unique ability to spot a hidden connection, a secret link between two things that seem totally different on the surface. He even broke it down into 4 different kinds. You can go from the big picture to the specific detail, like saying a ship lies instead of the more technical is anchored. Or you can flip that around, using a huge number, like 10,000, just to mean a whole lot. Then there's comparing similar actions, like drawing a sword and drawing the life out of someone. But the most powerful of all is the analogy, like calling a wine cup the shield of Dionysus. It's just a brilliant way to show they both serve a similar purpose for their respective gods. And here's the absolute key to it all. You can learn techne, that's the craft of writing, the rules, the grammar, the structure. It's like learning the chords and scales on a guitar. But you can't be taught eudaiphyia. That's the natural-born talent for seeing those resemblances. That's like having an innate sense of melody. A writer might be technically perfect, but without that gift, their work just won't sing.
But okay, just having a gift for metaphor isn't the whole story. Aristotle was nothing if not a pragmatist. He knew that great writing is a balancing act. It's a tightrope walk that every single poet has to learn how to master. So every writer is caught in this classic tug of war. On one hand, you desperately need clarity so people can actually follow what you're saying. And for that, use simple, everyday words. But the risk? It can get really flat, really dull. On the other hand, you want elevation. You want your writing to have style, to soar above the mundane. And for that, you use your metaphors, your fancy words. But if you go too far, your work just becomes a confusing riddle that nobody can solve. So what's the solution? Well, this leads us to his brilliant fix, the famous doctrine of the mean. You know, just like courage is the sweet spot between being a coward and being reckless, great writing is the sweet spot between being boring and being impossible to understand. The idea is to build your writing on a solid foundation of clear words and then use your metaphors to give it just enough lift to get off the ground. So how does this whole balancing act actually look in practice? Well, for the ultimate case study, we've got to turn to Homer, the undisputed master of the epic. For Aristotle, Homer's work was a perfect masterclass in how to apply these ideas on the biggest canvas imaginable. See, epic poetry has this massive advantage. Its sheer scope. It's like a cinematic wide-angle lens. It can capture entire wars, dozens of characters, and huge stretches of time. Homer was also a genius at essentially disappearing from his own poems. He just sets the stage and then lets his characters do the talking and the acting, which makes it feel incredibly dramatic. And it's all wrapped in this grand, stately meter that just feels perfect for gods and heroes. All right, so this brings us to a monumental showdown. Back in the day, Homer was the king, no question. But Aristotle, always the analyst, asks this really provocative question. You've got the sprawling grandeur of the epic, and you've got the focused intensity of tragedy. So which one is actually the higher, more perfect form of art? Let's look at the tail of the tape. The epic is huge, right? But because of that, its emotional punch gets a little diluted over thousands and thousands of lines. Tragedy, on the other hand, is a concentrated shot of pure intensity, delivered in just a couple of hours. And here's the real kicker. Tragedy has everything an epic has. Plot, character, ideas, but then it adds music and spectacle to the mix.
It's more unified, and because of that, it's just way more efficient. And so, in what was probably a stunning conclusion at the time, tragedy is declared the winner. And why? Because it achieves its artistic goal more perfectly. It does more with less. For Aristotle, the focused, concentrated emotional power of a play like Oedipus Rex is just a more potent, more refined artistic achievement than even the most incredible epic. So now that we've reached the very peak of artistic form with tragedy, we can finally understand Aristotle's timeless argument, his powerful defense of art itself. This is where he takes on all the critics who attack poetry for being unrealistic or irrational or even immoral. His defense is just a masterclass in clear thinking. First, he says, you have to know what kind of mistake you're looking at. A small factual error, like getting a historical detail wrong, is way less serious than a major artistic error, like a plot that makes no sense. Second, the impossible is totally fine if it serves the art. A probable impossibility is always better than an improbable possibility. And finally, and this is so important, art doesn't just show life as it is. It can show us life as it ought to be, holding up ideals for us to aim for. This quote just sums it all up perfectly. You have to judge art by its own rules, not the rules of science or politics. A poem's job is to create a specific emotional effect, and if it does that beautifully, then it's a success, period. It's a defense of artistic freedom that feels just as urgent today, maybe even more so. And that brings us right back to where we started. Aristotle was convinced that this eye for resemblances was a natural gift. You either have it or you don't. But is he right? Can you actually practice this? Can you train your brain to start seeing those hidden connections all around us? It's a great question to mull over. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.